Alright. We'll get started in just a moment. We forgot to cover the homework last week, so the first thing we're going to do is cover the homework. No, the next homework, homework 3. Homework 3. So this weekend, Saturday, you have homework 2 due, right? The following Saturday, you'll have homework 3. Yeah. Upcoming Saturday, you have homework 2. Alright, Chris or Stephanie, I don't know if one of you wants to come up and talk about the homework for week 3.
Okay, so the next assignment, like Carson said, this isn't the one that's due this Saturday, it's the one that's due the following Saturday. So it's going to be a JavaScript assignment, and it gives you the repo names that you're going to create, and you get a choice of either word guess game or psychic game. So you'll create whichever repo for what you're going to do, and then inside that local repo. For some reason the mouse isn't going over here, Carson?
Go all the way to the right. Try on my main screen. There you go.
Oh, it's reversed. Got it. Thank you. Okay. So inside your local Git repo, you'll create index.html, and then a directory called assets. And then inside assets, you're going to make 3 additional folders: JavaScript, CSS, and images. And then you'll put files in there accordingly. I think the only one that should be new to you there is the JavaScript folder, but it works just like the CSS folder. You just put your JavaScript files in there. So you have option 1, Psychic Game, which is the basic assignment. And like I said, I'm not going to read through the full instruction set. You guys can do that. And then the option 2, which is the recommended. So this is similar to your first homework. So you have sort of a basic version and then a more advanced version, is the word guess game. So you can... I mean, the way the first one worked, they have their choice, right? They can do one or both, or, whatever they decide they want to do. So same deal here. Let's see. So, few tips: just code your game one piece at a time. Do everything in small pieces. And I think a couple people ran into this on the first assignment where they kind of coded a bunch all at once and then sort of got lost in it. So try to code small pieces, test them out, make sure they're working the way you expect before you move on to do something else. Pseudocode. So the pseudocode, when you get into JavaScript, is really important. You want to actually just write out in plain English what you're trying to accomplish before you code it, and that will help sort of clarify it in your own mind, and then help guide you as you start actually writing out the code. If you encounter bugs, make sure you check within your DevTools on Chrome or whatever browser you're working. Look in the stuff in the console log to see what errors you've made in your code. Try your best to deliver a working, playable game. Substance over style. It doesn't look great in this instance. That's not really the point. We're looking at the JavaScript mostly for this assignment and the logic and flow of the JavaScript. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts. Do you guys have any questions about that? And then make sure once you're done that you do add this to your portfolio that you started at the beginning, because one of the goals out of this is to actually, at the end of the 24 weeks, you guys should have a working portfolio of everything you've done, so that if you're going into interviews, you have something to show. So make sure you add it to your portfolio once you're done. I don't know, that's probably not going to be part of the grade. That's just some good sound advice. Any questions? Okay. You good?
Okay. Also in the GitLab homework instructions folder, there are some demo movies too that you can watch of how these projects look. For instance, the Psychic game one. Like, basically, it's just this little game that they're playing where you'll type something in and it'll try to, like, guess the letters. I know it's kind of small. I think they're supposed to be audio. I have no idea. Anyway, basically you'll type in and it tries to guess the letter. You can go watch these on your own. They're in the GitLab repo, like I said, under homework instructions for week 3. So if you have any more questions, of course, reach out to any of us and we'll answer them. Alright, so we're going to be covering some more JavaScript today. We're going to be going over loops, some loops. We're going to go over some arrays a little bit more. So we're just taking what we learned on Monday and adding another level to it. But the first thing we're going to do is recap a little bit of what we've gone over. So I have this little example project I started here. I was going over some stuff with Jake. He had questions about conditionals, as I'm sure you all do, about how to make them work properly. So for the variables, we went over variables, right? So we just got the var keyword, the space, the name of the variable, which has to be one word, right? It can't have any spaces in it, can't have any weird characters. Limit it to numbers, letters, and underscores. Then the equal sign, and then your value. And your value can be a string, a number, it can be a Boolean value, or it can even be an array of a bunch of stuff, right? It can be anything. So there's a whole bunch of options for what your variables can be. Does anyone have any questions on variables and how to use them properly? I figure that's probably the easier bit. We could talk more about the conditionals and how to properly use those. So if anyone has any questions, the next 10 minutes or so is the time to ask them. So how do we feel on if, else statements? How are people feeling? Fist of 5. Got a bunch of numbers, okay. 2s, 3s, 4s. I don't see anyone who's below a 3. 2s, 3s, okay. Well, why don't we cover them a little bit more? Because I don't just want to cover the if-else. I want to cover all the different conditions that you could possibly use in an if-else, right? So one of the big ones, too, is like the double equals and triple equals and how confusing those can be. So anyway, I have this little project. It's nothing too fancy. You can see it's logging right here in the console. If, because I have a variable likes teaching set to true, and if I like teaching, it's just going to console log if. Otherwise, there's some other conditions that may or may not happen. In this case, they're not. So if we keep it simple and we just go with the else, right? How do I make sure that this else is going to happen? Like, what do I have to change to make the else happen?
Change true to 0 or false.
Change like teaching to false. We're going to use explicit Boolean values. So if I change like teaching to false, go ahead, refresh, I get the else. Okay? Any questions on that? What I just did there? So the double equals and the triple equals, because I said briefly on Monday that there are other ways that you can do equality checks. One of the good ones that you're going to use a lot would be the triple equals. So this triple equals true is the same as this when that value is a Boolean value. So when like teaching equals true, this would be the equivalent check in the if. Obviously, it's a little extra work, right? There's more typing for no real reason there. But if I refresh, you'll see it's console logging the if out again. Double equals will do the same thing in this scenario. Okay? But remember, there's a caveat to the double equals, and basically what I want to tell you up front is just use triple equals for now. If you see double equals, you can assume it works pretty much the same way as your triple equals, but the triple equals is a little bit safer, right? So I would recommend in everything you guys do a triple equals. It's going to avoid some weird kind of side bugs. An example would be, what's going to happen here? With likes teaching equal true, but it checks if it equals 1. With the double equals. It'll equate to true. Do you know why?
Because true is 1.
True is 1. A true is 1. A true is anything other than 0. False is 0. So I refresh, It's still if. Okay? And that works with the double equals, because the double equals is like, well, 1 and true, they're effectively the same thing, because 0 is false, anything else is a true. However, if I add the triple equals, we get our else. And the reason why is that triple equals is saying, I want to see if likes teaching equals the number 1. Literally the number 1. And in this case, it equals true. So the double equals was saying I need something that's like true. And in this case, 1 is like true. It's enough like true that they're equal. But the triple equals is like, literally, I want to check if likes teaching equals 1. And because it does not equal 1, it equals true. It fails. And this is why we want to use the triple equals. Because if I have likes teaching equal to true, and I do a doubles equals, and say, well, if it equals 1, that's good. And then the code in here is expecting it to equal a 1, but it equals true, and it does some addition or something to it, you could get weird side effects, and then you get a weird bug that you don't know why, right? You're like, why does this bug exist? Everything seems to be working properly. And so it just becomes a pain. So we want to use the triple equals. Now the complement is the not triple equals, okay? So this is still a triple equals because the first equal sign is replaced with an exclamation point, which is pronounced as not. You often hear people call it a bang symbol in programming as well. But this is does not equal with the triple equals, so the strict check, okay? So if likes teaching does not equal 1, then we're going to print if. Otherwise, we'll print else. So what does everyone think we're going to get? If. Nice. Exactly. Because true does not equal the number 1. It literally does not equal the number 1. So if I go ahead and put a 1 there, now we get our else. Because it does equal the number 1, but we're making sure that it does not equal for this if to actually activate, right? And the equivalent for the double equals version is just like this. Take one of the equal signs off. So it does not equal. And you're going to see a lot in other programming languages. This is the syntax, this double equals version. You'll never be a triple equals. And the triple equals is basically to clean up the mistake of JavaScript that the double equals introduced. And that is how flexible it is. And everyone was like, that really sucks. Please don't ever do that. And so they entered the triple equals, and now it works different. Okay, so on the equals and double equals and triple equals and all of that stuff. Any questions?
That's where I have a question.
Sure.
Can you make a variable with like, I guess, like naming it true or naming it like undefined or something that's already...
It's a good question. Can you name a variable true? So the answer is no. Anything that's a keyword, you cannot use it as a variable name. It's a good question. We didn't cover that on Monday. So if it's a var, true, false, there's a bunch of other keywords. If, else, while, do, those kinds of words that we'll run into in JavaScript, they can't be variable names. Now I can make this t. That works fine. When I was going over this earlier, Jacob asked the question of why is it a double equal and triple equal, not just a single equal sign? And that's a good question as well. Single equals is always an assignment operator in JavaScript. So whenever you see a single equal, it means you're assigning some value to some variable. Okay? That's it. That's all it can do. So the double equal, triple equal, they mean x equal to y, right? They're literal equal to. So what else can we do to make this more complicated? We can bring in our else if, right? And we can add some of the other operators. So likes teaching is greater than 2, for instance. And we can console.log else if. Alright, so right now we already know that likes teaching is equal to 1, and we're doing a strict check, does it equal 1? And we're going to get the if. If I make likes teaching 2, what am I going to get? Else? If? Else? Whoops, I ran the code in VS Code. It did not like that. I get an else. Why did I get an else? Because the else if is saying is like teaching greater than 2, and the answer is no, because it is 2. Now, If I change it to greater than or equal to, oh my gosh, it is having fun time. Then I'll get the else if. Now there are some complements to the greater than. There's the less than equal to. So right now, it is equal to 2. Obviously, if I change it to 1, it's going to hit the if operator. But if I change it to 0, we should get the else if still, right? And to that extent, if I change it to 5, we're going to get that else again. And again, very similar to the greater than, we have the less than 2, right? So if it's 0, negative 1, negative anything, you know, less than 0, it's effectively going to be this else if. Any questions on that? Any questions on any of the other syntax or the other stuff that we've seen with JavaScript? Because we're going to talk about arrays a little bit more in a second here. One of the things that I think Michael brought up on Monday was, he's like, I think I understand a lot of how the code works, but the syntax trips me up, right? It makes it really hard to like keep track because I don't know the syntax very well, and I have to Google a lot of stuff, and you know, it just feels like there's a lot of extra work there, and that's true. That's the answer. That's going to be the case for everyone, right? You're not super familiar with the syntax yet, so you're not going to remember every little detail. So don't be surprised when you're slowed down. You're like, I understand conditionals and how they work, and I get the logic of all of this, but I don't quite remember how to do it all. Like, there's still lots of stuff I don't remember how to do either in some languages, so it's like, gotta Google it. How do I do an blah, blah, blah in this language, right? How do I do an if statement in JavaScript? You might have to Google that, and that's okay. I don't expect you all to remember everything we've gone over yet, and you shouldn't expect that either. And if you do, great. What's up, Heather?
Weird question. So, else if you're wanting to catch this specific entry, right? And say there's a couple of different entries you want to fetch, can you do multiple else ifs?
That's a great question. We didn't even cover that, but yes, you can. You can do multiple else ifs, as many as you'd like, actually. So we could make likes teaching is greater than 100. And you can do this as many times as you want. There's no limit to how many else ifs you add. Obviously, they all have to be different, or you're never going to hit some of them, right? But you can basically make a set of conditions that can all do different things. And you'll run into this soon enough. Yeah, great question.
Better do a key switch though.
We haven't gotten to switch yet. So, yeah, this could definitely happen. All right, let's talk a little bit about arrays. Okay, so arrays. Remember, arrays are like a cabinet, right? Or some form of a container, but a cabinet's a good one because it can have different shelves, different doors, whatever, where you can put stuff, and it's so big, and you can put something in each of those little containers, right? And they can be whatever you want. It doesn't matter what it is in JavaScript. Just anything you can put in the array. You can put another array. You can have a cabinet in a cabinet, right? And each one of these is referenced by an index. And that index starts from 0, going up to the last element in the array, right? And so that would be the length of the array minus 1. So if you have 5 elements in the array, in this case we have 6, it's going to be 6 minus 1, or 5. Just like the first element is 1 minus 1, or 0, right? And then we can console log these bad boys out. So if I open this in Chrome, and I look in the console, you'll see everything logged out in order, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Bruce Lee, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Will Smith, Esther, Marie Curie, and Joan of Arc, right? You can also console log the array if you want to see everything that's in the array. And the last one there is literally the array with the index and the value. You can open it up, you can see the length. You can also console log the array's length. The array variable name dot length. Right? 6. The last one. Any question on the arrays? How you access stuff, what they are? I know this is really kind of just a quick, hey, remember arrays, kind of an exercise here that we're doing together.
Can you get like 2 of the indexes at once, like in one line?
No, you cannot. You have to separate them. So we could, because console log allows you to do a comma here, we can have another accessor, right? Index accessor right here for the first element, and they're technically on the same line, but we can't do like 0 and 1 or whatever and get both out at the same time. It's actually a different kind of thing going on there. So the answer is no. It'd be nice, but no. Cool? So we're going to do another array exercise together real quick. If you open number 16 in GitLab, array setting, you should have this unsolved. Let me just open it. So basically, we're going to follow the instructions in the file, and we're going to do some stuff to an array. Okay? Okay. So right now we have an array with Coke, Pepsi, water, and orange juice in it, right? And we have our first statements, which basically are just going to console log everything out. And if I open it up, again, you'll see first statement, console log, second statement, console log, okay? We're going to learn how to modify elements of an array. And we're also going to learn about a new function, too, called toLowerCase that allows us to lowercase things. So with an array, just like we can access stuff at its index, we can also change the value of the array at the index. And it's pretty easy to do. So we take the array variable name, we take the index we want to change, you do an equal sign. This is just like a variable declaration like we would see, right? So say you have variable x equals 10, and then later you do x equals 11, and you're changing the variable. You can do the same thing with the array, and you can also change the individual values of the indices in the array. So in this case, we want to change Coke. Let's make it lowercase, right? And then if we refresh, you'll notice in the second statement, Coke right here is now lowercase. Now you may be asking, okay, well I can get to the value at index 0 and I can change it. What can I change it to? You can change it to anything. Just like when you're building the array, the value can be anything because it's an array. And arrays let you do that. I can even make it another array. The important thing to remember here is you can change this value by accessing the index of the array equal and setting it equal to some new value. This is that assignment operator we're talking about with the single equals, right? This is how you assign the value of the array. Now, what this is asking us to do is to make everything lowercase. So one way is to do it how we did it here, which is very simple, and just rewrite the string as all lowercase. But JavaScript is smart enough that it knows how to take, it has special functions built in that allow you to make things lowercase. Now, strings, whenever you have a string, have built-in functions already that exist on them, okay? So, for instance, var s equals Carson in all caps. S is a string, so I can do s dot to lowercase with closing parentheses after it. Now, does anyone have an idea of what drinks 0 is going to be now? It's going to be Carson, but how so? It's going to be Carson in lowercase. Yep, exactly what it is. So remember how we have console.log, we have alert, we have prompt, we have confirm, we have all these things that are called functions. And I talked about it briefly. We haven't got into functions super in depth yet, and we will soon. Functions can be accessed in very many ways. You can create them yourself. You can call them a raw, like alert and confirm, where they don't have anything. Or you can call them kind of like console.log, where it's something, some variable, dot the function name, open parenthesis, some value, closing parenthesis. Now, not every function takes in a value, so 2 lowercase doesn't need anything, so it's just open closing parenthesis. But because you have the open and closing parenthesis, we're basically saying we have a function and we're calling that function, right? So strings, like console, have built-in functions. So console has log, console has error, console has warn. It has a bunch of functions built into it, and we've already seen this kind of paradigm where you have something dot some function that you're calling. Strings have functions as well. There's string dot 2 lowercase is one we're going to use a lot. There's char at, and you can tell position in the string. For instance, we want to do position 0, which is a C, and we can see if I go ahead and refresh, now I have a capital C in the drinks 0, okay? But 2 lowercase is one we want. Now instead of S, because we don't want a 2 lowercase s, we want a 2 lowercase everything that's already in the drinks array. Does anyone have an idea of how we would do that?
Use a for loop, or you can say...
We're not at for loops. How can we do it right now?
You can use the drinks, and you can index each one
Drinks?
and say drinks 0 equals drinks 0 dot 2 lowercase.
Okay, so we can take drinks 0 dot 2 lowercase, right? And see if that would work. Yeah, it does. Coke's now lowercase. Now the reason why we can do this is because drinks 0 is a string. So, Andy, question for you. If I didn't want to access it like this, if I didn't want to do drinks 0 equals drinks 0 dot 2 lowercase, say I wanted to set drinks 0 to a variable first, and then 2 lowercase that variable, what would I write? Drinks dot 2 lowercase?
With no like indicator of what you want out of that string.
What would that do? That's going to try to 2 lowercase the array, but this array is not a string, so it'll just kind of freak out. But I want to take the first index of the array, drinks 0, and I want to assign it to a variable. How do I assign it to a variable? What's the first thing I got to do when I create a variable? Var.
And then we'll do variable.
Let's call it drink 1. And then what? What's next, Andy? Space. And then what?
And then equals, and then...
There you go, man. You got it. Now, if I want to take that first drink, and I want to do 2 lowercase, what do I put here instead of drinks? Drink 1. Exactly. So what I did is I accessed the value in the array at index 0, right? The first index 0. I put it in its own variable called a drink 1, and then I can just call 2 lowercase on that string itself instead of having to write drinks 0 or whatever. Now obviously this is a bit more verbose, doing it this way, and then having the call down here when I could have just done this, like we were originally, like Jesse suggested. But it just goes to show that you can get the stuff out of the array and assign it to a variable. Yeah, Matt?
So you do the var, drinks 1, and then drinks 0, so you can get an individual, get it by itself, so you don't get all of those capitalized.
Right, yeah, this doesn't get the entire array, it just gets the first one. So if I wanted to get water out, what would I have to change here?
You're going to get drinks 2.
Drinks 2. And then what I got to change here?
With that, drinks 1, drink 1, sorry.
Drink 1, it's still drink 1 because we didn't change the variable name. So now it's water lowercase in the first index. If I wanted to replace water itself, I would do that. Anyway, I'll get it. One of these days, I'll type the right word. Alright. So now we go back, water's lowercase. So, as we're all probably thinking, we can take this whole line and copy it, right? I don't need that many. And I can easily just change this to index 0, index 1, that was already 2, and index 3, right? Index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. And now I have everything lowercase. So there's two important things here. One, we can access the array element by its index. Two, we can change the value at an index by setting something equal to that index, right? So we can get to the index and set it equal to something else. And then three, there are special functions we can use, and string has one called toLowercase that just exists on strings that makes things lowercase. Again, any string has this, so even if I have CCC, I can still get to toLowercase no problem, and you'll see CCC's there in the first index of the array. Any questions on these arrays before we move on? So some of you may be wondering, what if I have an array that's really, really huge, like 1,000 elements, and I want to change every single one? I'd probably suck, right? That's 1,000 lines of code just to change those. Well, there's a better construct called a for loop that we get to use. So let me go jump to the for loop slides because they do have some good visualizations. All right, so for loop. Again, we have this array, right? You can visualize it like so. Say it's a bunch of cages in a zoo, and we have 0, 1, 2, and 3. And we want to go through every single one of those cages together in one very succinct set of code, like a few lines of code maybe, and we want to print out every single animal that's in the zoo. So right now, the only way we know how to do that is to go through and literally say for every index, I want to console log it, right? I want to print out everything in the zoo. But this is a pain in the butt. So what's wrong here? Well, we have to write 4 lines of code to print 4 different animals. If we had 100 animals, you have 100 lines of code. You can imagine things get pretty unmaintainable. And then there's even the bigger question of, say I have an array, and at the time I'm writing the code, I don't know how big it'll be. It could be as big as it wants to be. How do you write that code? Good luck. I have no idea. There are these cool things called for loops that allow us to basically subvert that. So let me go ahead and open up the for loop code. I don't think this is an exercise. I think we're supposed to do this together. Oh, okay. So what I want you to do, actually, we talked a little bit about for loops together, but what I want you to do is take this, number 17. I actually want you guys to talk amongst yourselves about it. So go ahead and open it up in your GitLab. I'll open it up here. This is a for loop. Right here. In all its glory. Look at that code. Discuss it amongst yourselves for a few minutes. Like, what is it doing? Why would you want to use it? Kind of talk about the parts of it, the var I equals 0, the I less than whatever. See if you can figure out exactly what it does by yourselves before I go into it. So just spend a couple minutes doing that.
Or number 17.
Number 17, yeah. Also run it if you get a chance in your browser and see what gets printed. Yeah, and 15. The array ones, go ahead and send out the solved. I mean, it's infinite. Is it infinite though? Is this for loop infinite? Yeah, you're right. It could be, but is that one? Tell Alex why you think that.
Alex, I think that's it. There are individuals that you can put into an array, but so it just holds the place of 0, 1, 2, right? Because it goes up by 1 every time. I mean, so technically, you have that
For loops? Why is it I? I'll cover that. I'll cover that. Trying to figure it out? Okay, cool.
Value being passed into the function 4 anyways. If you put a 4 on there, it would be the same next week. For some reason, this
This is number 17, yeah. If you added something to the array, it'd be added. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
no matter what that says.
Mm-hmm. Okay, why don't we talk about this? About what's going on here. So, if you ran this, you looked in the console, you'll see that for everything in the array, the vegetables array, we printed it out with I love in front of it, right? I love carrots, I love peas, I love lettuce, I love tomatoes. So, for loop has 3 distinct parts, right? It has this var I equals 0. It's kind of weird. I is less than vegetables.length, and then another semicolon with I plus plus. Is there anyone who can explain all 3 of these to me?
var I equals 0 is instantiating the variable, creating basically creating it. I less than vegetable.length is actually checking to see if I is less than the length of the array vegetable. And I plus plus actually increments I by 1 as each time you go through the loop, and it continues that until the length of the variable array, which is 4.
Right. So, as Jesse said, we have the first set right here. It creates a variable I. It's called I traditionally because it stands for index, right? That's what this first block is. It's basically just enabling you to initialize some sort of variable that's going to increment with the loop. the second check right here, the second condition is I less than vegetables dot length. So there's some interesting stuff we can talk about here, but basically it's saying while I is less than the length of the array, we're going to continue to loop, okay? And this, the last part after the second semicolon is I plus plus. Plus plus means it's a post increment, which means after we run this code, we're going to add 1 to array. So it's the same as writing I equals I plus 1. Which is also the same as writing I plus equals 1, which is, then again, the shortest if you just did I plus plus. And again, it's I plus plus because you want it to happen after it loops through the for loop, okay? You don't want it to happen before. If we had it plus plus I, it would immediately set I equal to 1, I'm pretty sure. Actually, no, it won't, because the third condition always happens last. So anyway, I plus plus is just traditional. It doesn't matter in the end of the for loop if you did plus plus I or I plus plus, but generally it means after you do something. Just remember that it's the same as taking I and adding 1. That's all that is. So we're setting I to 0 because why would we want it to be 0? So we can get to the first index of the array, right? Because the indexes are 0 based. If they were 1 based, we'd set it to 1. Now, why do we want I to be less than the vegetables dot length? So say the length is 4, which it is. Why do we want it to be less than 4? What happens when it gets to 4?
It gives you it actually increments, actually gives you the last value.
It gives you less value if I is equal to 4?
If I equals 4, it'll give you tomato.
If I equals 4, it'll give me tomato. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and...
I'm sorry, it'll give you -1.
It'll give you a -1? It'd give you an undefined in JavaScript.
If it actually runs,
JavaScript it'll run, but it'll give you undefined. So basically, there's only 4 elements in this array, right? So that goes up to index 3. And so if we let it get I equal to 4, we'd be trying to access index 4, and it would go ahead and print undefined. So we change this to less than or equal to. Easy change. I love undefined. That's a weird vegetable. So that's why we want it to stop just before the length of the array, because remember, as I said, the last index is accessed by taking the length of the array minus 1, and that's effectively what this is doing. Now, if you want to check and see exactly how this is working out, you can also add another console log, and you can write I equals, and then you can do plus I, right? Now if we run it, I equals 0, I love carrots. I equals 1, I love peas. I equals 2, I love lettuce, so on and so forth. So this is like, right here, if we were to unwrap this code and literally console log vegetables 0 through 1, 2, 3, right? That's what we'd be getting for I. You can just make that substitution in your head. Or if you were to do var I equals 0, and you went console.log vegetables I, like so, right? And then we go ahead and we simply do I plus plus. This is basically what the for loop is doing. And by basically, I mean this is exactly what the for loop is doing. The only difference between my code and this code is the for loop has built in this condition to say when it needs to stop. Okay, so we know, because there's 4 items in the array, to stop after we've accessed the 4th index. It doesn't know that. It can just go on forever if we wanted it to. So we have to tell it. So again, if I print these out, you'll see the same. Carrots, peas, lettuce, tomatoes. Any questions on these loops and how they work? What's up, Matt?
Can you explain the I is less than vegetables dot length and the I plus plus?
Right, so the I less than vegetables dot length is saying when I, while I is less than the length of the array, which in this case is 4, so while I equals 0, 1, 2, and 3, we can go ahead and execute the code that's in this for loop, right? And then as soon as I gets to 4 or greater, it stops. It doesn't work anymore. I plus plus is the same as writing I equals I plus 1. Okay, so it just adds 1 to I. That's it. And you can see here, because I did the console log of I equals, of where it stops. I equals 0, 1, 2, and 3. it never gets to 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth, right? Because vegetable's length is 4, and we're saying only do this while I is less than 4. And 0, 1, 2, and 3 are all less than 4, right? What's up, Peyton?
So instead of I plus plus, could you do like, say like I plus 2 or something similar to where it gets like every odd number in the array?
Yep.
Oh. That's cool.
So this is the odd indices, right? Even though it's 0 and 2. They're index 1 and index 3. But yeah, absolutely. You can do whatever you want. You can do any sort of calculation as long as you're taking... You don't even actually need to change I here. I can change whatever I wanted. This is just basically, this is just a block of code that happens after the for loop is done. It's iteration. You can change whatever you want. So you can even leave it like this. Things are about to get real wacky. Basically, what's happening right now is it's printing this infinite number of times. So it's just going to keep going and going until it just can't anymore. And it actually broke. My browser's got to be forced quit. Anyway, that's an infinite loop. You don't want to do that, as we just saw. So yeah, for loops. Any other questions on these? Sure, Paul.
Why did they write it differently? Why did they make it 0? It seems like don't have any
For the arrays, why does it start at 0? That has to do with where arrays come from and computer memory layouts and stuff. It all started at 0, and they just kind of kept that. So there are some newer languages, or newish languages in terms of computer science, that do start with 1s, but they all suck. And everyone just does this. It's just convention. It is standard. Almost every language. Now, some languages offer the ability to choose what index you start at. So like C#, for example. By default, they start at 0, but you can actually say, this one I want to start at -1000. Or this one I want to start at 12. This one I want to start at 1, right? You can do that, but it's pretty uncommon. Usually we just start at 0 because everyone knows that. It's usual, right? So, yeah, it's tradition at this point. It's just how we do it. So you're safe in assuming that any other language you view and you start working with, the array is going to start at 0, and you'll find out real quick if that's not the case because your code won't work, right? So it's just how it is. Cool. So we are all going to do exercise number 18. There's a zoo loop unsolved. Go ahead and work on that one for the next 15 minutes. Yeah. I'm going to pull up the instructions here on my screen. Also, I forgot to start recording again, so I need to figure that one out too. So if anyone needs to watch the recording, sorry, you're going to miss the first half an hour class. Alright, this is number 18. Alright, use a for loop to rewrite the file. If you need help, go ahead and use code from those array exercises, or if you could just slack out the exercise we just did so they can look at that too. And then once you got it functioning, share with people around you, see if you can spruce it up a bit, add stuff to arrays or whatever, you know, make it as fancy as you can to play with them.
There we go. Yeah, so then if you start it with the same exact line, instead of bar I equals 0, if you start bar I equals 1, then you get all the
So not for when they have the plus plus on there. You want to keep that.
regardless of what, yeah, because if you set it to 1, it's still going to catch it.
Look at your array name at the top. What's the variable name? What is it in there? What do you think? Console.log line.
Oh man, look at that. So close yet so far. Yeah, I know, like,
Did you get it?
we got the same thing. It's gonna suck to like doing this and stuff, and like, it's so simple, but you're like, what the hell?
Oh no, I told Garrett, if you look closely, I have a flat spot right here from banging my head on the desk.
Like, it was so easy to fix. Why is
No, and most of the time it's not like that staring you right in the face. The frustration is, it's only doing exactly what you want it to do. It's like, why didn't you read my mind?
You're using for loops, yes, and because when we start writing like more complex programs, you'll never be able to tell how many items will be in an array. So you need another way to be able to do what you need to do without knowing the explicit number of items in the array. Because with the for loop, you're just basically saying do this for the length of the array, right? You don't care what the length is. Just do this for the length of the array. So immediately you've eliminated that step of needing to know how big the array is. So there's lots of reasons why you use that. But those are two. So saving time and not everything's deterministic before you start writing the program. What's up, Matt? Okay, I'll come over. So now what I would do, since we still have time, is maybe add something like if array index I equals hours, then you usually compare something else, right? And that's see how complicated it is. So again, if you finish this one early, inside your for loop, start adding conditions. Something like if index I equals or if zoo animals I equals zebra, I'm gonna console log some different message, right? Oh man, I love zebras. Or if it equals rhino, I hate rhinos, or something. I don't know. Make it more complicated. See what you can do.
It's another one, right? I'm telling you. Put padding right there now on the hotline. It'll save you a lot of headaches later.
That's crazy.
And I'm sure there's an extension that'll point stuff like that out. Like missing brackets on the roads and stuff.
There should be auto completion stuff. Look for any
Like a tool. Really bad at
look what? No.
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 I hope not.
Think of how many times you'll make that mistake. It's not a bad thing to depend on them.
Especially, I mean,
No, it's not a bad thing to make it easier for you.
really small files. Think about when you start working in 50
Yeah, something
plus
like, well,
lines.
you should know.
I don't think most people do it that way. It's not that I've run across it. Like any real
So
routine-
I get your thinking, but this is something that's so trivial that the dependency on it's okay.
Yeah.
Like no one today. A lot of times people say, "Oh, you should really try doing this in like Notepad to be a pro at it or whatever," but it just does not apply anymore. Like if you really want to get serious, go ahead and try to program it in Vim.
Have been working for like years.
I mean, I've been in it for years and years. She's been in it for years and years. Yeah, make it faster. Work smart, not hard. Some people think it's like a rite of passage. Stupid. Yeah.
This sounds terrible.
The equivalent would be if you did it all in Vim, I guess. But Vim can even download extensions to help you with that stuff, and most people even use Vim. But yeah, it is pretty terrible.
Oh, like
I'll just tell you, Alex, the thinnest I'll go is VS Code. So I'll use something like Vim if I have a quick little change I gotta write, or like a super short file, but VS Code's about as tool-free as I'll get.
So it streamlines all that. Like
Streamline's a lot of crap that really isn't, like, yeah, you need to know it, you need to be aware of it, but it's trivial stuff, you know, like closing your parentheses.
like the doc type filler, automatic filler.
Yeah, then autocompletes and stuff, IntelliSense, those things are really, really helpful.
That's like tab too, right?
Yeah, you do dot, and then you can select the function, hit tab or whatever.
Because I've been like typing out like
That's good. So that's good because it's going to remind you of the names of those functions and stuff. And while you're starting, those are things you probably do want to type by hand. Parentheses, that's one thing. Yeah. If I'm not typing, and here I can type okay, but I'm not like crazy fast, but I worked with some people that were like... Yeah.
Yeah, when we did that typing test during the river, I was like, oh, 60 words per minute. I was like, I killed it. Then I went to the programming one. It was like,
Yep. I just got my programming for like complicated stuff up to like 50 or 60, and I was really proud about that, but I had to work really hard. But it depends on the language, it depends on a lot of things.
If I go home, I don't work on my actual computer with my keyboard. I force myself to get kind of muscle memory on the keyboard.
Yeah, you should. Get a mechanical keyboard, change your life.
oh, I have a gaming PC.
Is it a mechanical one with like red switches or something?
Black something. It's pretty sick.
I use brown switches at work, and I just use brown switches. They're the best ones I've found. For me. With what? It's not that loud. I like it. It makes me feel productive when you're like, and you're going super fast.
It's sad. I just buy whatever it is. I don't even know it's
Well, browns are quieter than blues, though. So blues are the traditional one that are really loud. Browns are a little softer, so they're not as loud. They're still loud, though. Low profile chiclets. Yeah, super quiet.
Like, I won't go for not individual. Like, that's the main thing.
Have space. Yeah, have space, yeah. Yeah, this one is like that. It's got space between all the keys. It's the chiclet, like, but mechanical keyboards are just, you can type so much faster on them. A good one? Yeah, absolutely. They have way better. I forget what the word is when you can depress it super easily. There's like no force on it, so the ones I use, it's like you just barely put your hand in it, and the whole thing comes down. Also, they have you can press however many you want and get the response for all of them at the same time, right? So it's they're generally better than your traditional USB. So instead of like a 6 or 10 character limit, granted I only have 10 fingers. If I press, if I put my arm on it, all of them whoop, are right there. It's better interface. Yeah, the old IBM Model M's or whatever. These things are good. All right, so let's talk about this. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, so everyone can watch. So we have this array of zoo animals, and we're console logging everything out because it's easy to do it. We know how it works. You just get everything at their individual index. That's great, but good programmers are really lazy, generally speaking. That's why probably part of for loops came into existence, is because we're just super lazy, and like if I only have to write a couple lines of code, then I'm going to do it. So we can go ahead and do our initialization, right? First thing first in our for loop. And then we need to do our condition, which is going to be while I is less than the length, and then we need to go ahead and increment I so that we can get a different index each time and not get an infinite loop. And then we can simply do zoo animals I, right? So this code right here is now useless. No need for that. That's stupid. Any questions on that? Okay, Fist of 5, how are we feeling on loops, for loops? Pretty good. Most people are feeling pretty good. That's good. That's good. You're going to get some more exposure to them in a moment, but go ahead and take a 15-minute break or so. Let's do 7:45, and we'll continue on.
My brother's visiting from New York. I have something I have to get to with them, so I have to leave at 9. Can I just go? All right, for sure. I'll look over the video. You have your entire presentation posted, right?
I will after class. I'll have to upload and stuff.
Okay, and I'll look over that and I'll have the TAs catch me up. I'll come in early, have the TAs catch me up next time.
Sounds great. Have fun with your brother, dude. Do you ever figure out media queries, Rolando?
Huh?
You ever figure out the media query stuff?
I haven't had time to look at it since I posted that.
I don't know if you've already seen the link. I
did.
Yeah.
I saw the link. I just haven't, I opened it just now because I woke up at 4 and I'm gonna work on it when I go to work later tonight.
Yeah, I noticed you posted at like 4 a.m. I was like, what?
Yeah, yeah, I work 10 to 5 or 9 to 5.
Like 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Really?
Yeah, I'm a cloud.
Oh, okay. Where at?
The IO data center.
Oh, okay. You work at IO?
I don't work for IO. I work for a company that's based there and I'm on one side.
So what, are you migrating stuff to like AWS or something? Or?
No, we have a private cloud.
Oh, you do the private cloud through IO's rack space?
I do all that physical infrastructure, like I'll rack that.
Oh, okay. So you're a hardware guy right now.
Hardware guy.
Do you do anything with software, or you just basically go in and set stuff up?
I did 3 years of CS degree before I dropped out and moved over here to work with companies, so I know programming and just never got a job in programming.
Yeah. So you're just re-upping your knowledge basically.
They're moving our site to Vegas. I
Oh.
don't want to move.
Oh,
And I
okay.
don't have like a college degree or anything, so I can't it's a little bit harder to find a job. And then I got an ad on Reddit for this, and I was like, I could probably do that.
But ads are very good for this.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's all it's about.
Yeah, actually, I every now and then I'll see an ad like on Facebook or whatever for this. I'm like, the hell? I teach it. Like, why are they sending me the ads? But they just know I do stuff.
I get it on Reddit, like every 5 blog posts on Reddit. You made coding.
They're very good.
Yeah.
And you just search like program like anything, it will bring it up.
Really? Well, they've gotten a lot of funding. So even when I started, I think Trilogy was fairly new last year when I started the first cohort. It was like the second round of cohorts in Arizona or something like that. Or I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was October, April, and then us in July. So we were the third one. It was already huge, and now like they're trying to go public or something. Like this company just exploded in the last few years. Like they're trying to do an IPO, be on the stock exchange. Man, that sucks.
I don't like waking up in the morning. Like, if I have to wake up in the morning, I prefer not to wake up before like 10 a.m.
Yeah. What was that? Oh, no. They're real small. 50 people maybe. So. Oh, really? You know Lisa? How do you know Lisa? Oh, okay. Yeah. Her compliment. Which one, Michelle or Andrea? Michelle. Yeah, and Don was a pastor for a while. Yeah. Yeah, I worked for them for almost 3 years. And then I was their manager, development and stuff, and I was like, I just don't want to be a manager. It wasn't very fun. So took a couple-year hiatus, and now they're like, well, why don't you come back? And I was like, okay. So they're nice people. They're really nice. We're about to do it. Oh, okay. But I'll tell you, we're gonna do next week. We're gonna do that. Inside these brackets, you can do whatever you want. You can write whatever code you want. It doesn't need to be one line. You can write any code. You can write another loop in there that does the same thing effectively if you want it. So you just got to know that it's inside the bracket, right? Okay. So
I put something in here.
Yeah. No, right in between. It's right above the console. You can enter some new lines using the if statement.
So like right here.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Totally. You can do as much as you want in that format.
You know, it's funny, the other day, I was at work and I was looking at notifications that, they're doing like a technology auction every year.
I just got blasted by a dust storm.
It was all written in Bootstrap. Like one of the bars, I noticed like the color of it and the background, but I was like, I inspected the page and look at the top, it was like,
Nice. Well, that's how prolific it is, right? Like, it's crazy. You'll find it on all kinds of weird websites.
oh man, I had a blast with it once I actually got the first part of the homework done. I was having so much fun with it. Like, it's actually really, Bootstrap is really
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's cool, man.
Just standing out on that porch and we just got blasted by a dust storm.
Last night, the storm rolled in out of nowhere for us, and it like started dumping rain for like 15 minutes. And it was just like, so probably get that again. Dude, these have been crazy though. We've had a lot of them.
A lot of lightning.
I
left my house yesterday and just a thunderstorm rolling in and all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of lightning. It was weird because it came out of nowhere. It was like clear when the sun went down, and all of a sudden there's lightning. I'm like, what the hell?
I left my house at like 8:30, and I actually, before I left my street, I doubled back to left my computer on. I'm like, I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah.
Not again. Like I just fried a hard drive like 3 months ago.
Bummer.
So mad.
Bummer.
I don't even know how. I was out of town. My computer was off. I was out of town. I come back. I'm like, oh yeah, I was in the game all night. Down on my computer. Oh, can't find your hard drive.
Huh.
Can't find it.
You must have got hit hard. I assume you have a surge protector, so pull up your surge protector too. Huh.
Just died on me.
That
I don't know if it like shut down temporarily, maybe. Like maybe I might have forced it.
Who knows? Sometimes it's rare for an SSD, but sometimes drives just take a dump. But SSDs are way less likely for that to happen.
Yeah, and it's not a bad one either. Usually the software will be like, oh, it's in check or warning or something.
Yeah.
You get any alerts, nothing, send it to you.
Huh. Yeah, that.
Like 4 days, random shipping, Q1.
Yeah. I know that feeling.
Starbucks, like, and then I was like, well, if I'm gonna redo it, I might as well read them. So like, I bought 2, like, without a computer for a week. Just felt really bad.
Yeah, that really sucks. I'm just glad I have the laptop and the desktop now. So like, if one goes down, I've got another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a laptop too. Just wasn't like I didn't use it as often since I got my desktop, and then now
Yeah.
I'm using this a lot more since I got this.
Yeah.
I got a good 24 hours.
My wife could do her I don't need her to be
What's up, Jay? Good, man.
My brother-in-law, he's a senior software engineer for Ticketmaster.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, when I went through class, I sat like on class for 6 months, like clueless. I was like, I hope that don't happen to me because I'm going to be fun. It's like,
Yeah, sometimes it takes time to set in.
They come from like beauty computers, and then we had like a little background in that. Worked a lot of stuff.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, he helped me like certain things like to me it helps like with like the meaning why we do this,
Yeah.
get to this, like the
Yeah.
plane, like the not under terminology.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm doing something I don't understand and someone else explains.
Yeah, right? I mean, sometimes it just takes a couple times. That's how it works for me, too. Like, I'll always have someone explain something. I have no idea what you just said to me, and then I'll go look it up later from someone else and be like, oh, now it makes sense, right? Yeah.
Dude, like running across the street and the wind is like taking us off our pushing out.
Did it just open up or something? Did this place just open up? Where is it?
It's like a candy store and like a cool rave.
Huh.
Get a ranch soda.
Nice. That sounds kind of gross.
The Russian one was worse.
I don't know if that's true. Yeah, we can't sit outside. Damn it.
It was already 100 degrees. The storm is crazy.
They were standing on the patio and it knocked the garbage can like rocking out.
We were crossing the street.
Oh, there it is.
Hey.
I was like, I thought I was gonna go sideways. That's crazy.
All right. There was another activity that if we had time we were going to do called another loop. We don't really have time, so we're going to skip it, but Chris slacked out the solution to it anyway, so if you want to look at it, feel free. It's just more looping exercises. But we're going to jump directly into another one. You can do this exercise with a partner. It's called, we're going to be doing a loop, but we're going to be adding some conditionals to it. So starting from scratch, write code that loops through the following array and logs the name of each animal on the farm to the console. So here's your array, my farm, chickens, pigs, cows, horses, and ostriches. Then check if the first letter in the animal's name begins with a C or a 0. If it does, create an alert saying starts with a C or a 0. Hint, you can access the first character of a string as if it were the first element of an array. So fun fact about strings, they are arrays. They are arrays of characters. So you can use them like an array. So that should be a hint for how you can get to the first character. Anyway, about 10 minutes, go ahead and work on this, and then we'll talk about it. And work with a partner. C-R-O. Oh, like the letter O. I might have said 0. I have no idea. Just blank. This is number 20, yeah, sorry. This is exercise 20. It's called hard loop. Hard loop, yeah, number 20.
Well, I got it here. Let me show you. I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know how to do this. But if you do this now, my farm. So if I do, my farm one farm at 0, that could be. Alright, so I got the console log, right?
Okay.
So it came up right.
Okay, yeah.
Now I'm like, what? So there you go.
Now you need an if statement, right?
Okay. If.
So,
Over.
it needs to be part of your loop, doesn't it?
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, that goes.
So how do you make it part of your loop?
It's the syntax.
Oh, it's put it inside the parentheses.
Yeah.
So
Right idea.
Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is check if the first character is an O, right?
it is.
Okay, so how do you check if, first of all, how do you get the first element? The array element. How do you get the array element? So why don't we set the index that we're currently at to a variable? So
let's go back to that.
there's no if right here. First we need the variable.
That's not the way.
So what are we gonna call this?
That's the way you do it. Try that works, but I think it's
So variable. What else do you have to have in the variable method? Var. Hey Chris. You need what? A name, right? Var. Name. What? Animal. Will it be a chicken or will it be whatever index we're on? Cool. That's good.
But the way that like that last empty exercise.
You want to get the element out of the array. What about my farm island? You want to get that index value of that index. We're literally getting the value out of the array.
I don't know if that will work, but it seems like it can.
You want to get my farm index value?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, out of the array. Okay. Yeah, so now you have it out of the array.
Maybe I'm just reading too much into this end. So you can access the first character of the string as if it were
So now we have that out. So you need to check the first character. Like I said, a string is an array, so how do you get the first character out?
But I would have given
Zero would be the index you want, right? So why don't you do another variable called first character and set it equal to the first character. First character of chicken, sure, for the first one. So, we need an x0 of what? What about animal? Isn't that the animal in the index in the array you're currently at? So what about animal index 0? That's index I. So get index 0 instead of index I. Now you use if statement.
Oh, okay. Alright, so animal.
You're going to need an if statement to see if it equals C or O. C or O, right?
Okay.
So there's one. The first thing is that if statement's not in your for loop.
Okay.
So it needs to be in your for loop.
Okay. So it's fine. Yeah, that's okay.
You'll need to, your if statement right now, it's going to be really hard to fit in, I won't try to leave it.
Saturday, like.
And then put a curly brace. So inside those two curly braces, whatever code you want, that's inside the curly brace. So we need an if statement inside. Okay, and what you need to do is you need to take the string in the array that we're currently viewing, right? So it's my farm index I. You need to get that string out, and you need to check the first character of that string. So my farm index I is a string, right? And I said a string can be accessed like an array, so you can get to index 0. So if you have my farm index I, how do you get to index 0? That way. This is why I'm having people do variables, because it's a little easier to conceptualize. So why don't you take my farm index I and set it equal to a variable? Do it called animal or something.
Okay. So you gotta put that inside. So put that up here.
Nope, it needs to be in the for loop. Put it before your if.
Oh wait, never mind.
Deleted something. No, it's not happening. Deleted your lines.
Anybody else need help?
Close the bracket on your right.
You don't have to wait for me to ask. You guys can ask. Okay. We can have it coming around.
The index I is my point here. We are actually, here, we're going to do this together. Alright, let's go over this together. This one proved to be pretty difficult, so it is a hard loop. That's good. Alright, I'm gonna just do it. I'm just gonna walk through it instead of just reviewing it. Okay, so the only thing it gives us is the array. That's all we start with, right? So first things first, we're going to need to build a for loop, correct? That's the first thing it asks for. So var I equals 0, okay? I is less than myfarm.length, okay? And I plus plus, so the usual for loop stuff. So one of the things I didn't mention that is my fault. I didn't even think about it, so this is one of those things that I don't even think about, right? Inside these curly braces, around this for loop, that is inside the for loop. And everything we're doing needs to be inside the for loop. So all of the code you write for this exercise needs to be inside these two curly braces that are part of the for loop. Otherwise, it's not part of the for loop. You can't access I. You can't use I. You can't use my farm I, right? Those things don't exist. So let's just console log the animal that's at index I. Okay? So for instance, if I took this and I put it there, what would happen? It would explode, right? Because I doesn't even exist. But inside of the for loop, inside these curly braces, I does exist, so we can do this. So what do we need to really do here? Well, we need to take the animal, the string animal at index I, and we need to see if it starts with a C or an O. The easiest way to think about this is first take the animal out of the array and assign it to a variable. That way we have this separate variable we can work with. It just makes it easier to think about. So again, another hint we had was that strings are arrays. So if we wanted to get to the first character, how do we get to that? Anyone have an idea? Like that, exactly. That is totally correct. Animal's a string. Animal's an array. Literally, we have arrays and arrays right now. My farm's an array. So we get the first, or the I ith element out of my farm array, and that gives us an animal. And then to get the first character of that animal, we can again just access index 0. We'll set it to another variable to make it easier to think about, right? So we don't need this space here. That's just an extra space for no reason. Now we need to do our if statement. We need to check if the first character equals C. And if it does, we can go ahead and alert. Starts with a C. Right? Let's do an else if. It's a nice little jingle. I like it. Else if it starts with an O. You should probably just make your quotes consistent when you're writing code though. So if you use single quotes, always use single quotes, double quotes, always use double. So now we have gotten to both C and O, right? Make sense? Now there's a bunch of ways we can write this. Does this not make sense to anyone? Is there anyone who's a little iffy on what exactly we just did and why it works? Is there anyone who's a bit iffy on this logic and why it works? I know it makes sense now that I'm explaining it, but it's important to note that strings are arrays, so you can access their elements like a normal array, 0 through the length minus 1, right? So pigs would be 0, 1, 2, 3. P at 0, I at 1, G at 2, S at 3, right? We can go ahead and take that out of the array, and then treat it as its own array. Get out the first character, which is at index 0, and we're off to the races. Now, what else can I do? Well, say I don't want all those variables. Would that work? Now, this one's a little bit more confusing to visualize as someone who's fairly new to programming, because you have to hold a lot of stuff in your head. One, you have to understand the value at I in my farm is a string, and then you have to remember that the value of 0 of that is a character, right? There's a lot going on, but you can definitely do this. Lastly, another way we can streamline this that I haven't taught you yet, but if you're familiar with conditionals. So, we need to check if it starts with a C or an O, and if it does, log starts with a C or an O. You can use something called the OR operator in a Boolean condition. These double pipes means OR. So if it starts with C, if that was the case, it would immediately go to this if block. Otherwise, it would check to see if it started with an O. And if it did, it would go into this if block. If neither of them are true, it doesn't work. It'll go to an else or to nothing. Okay? So those are a few ways you could write this. Using the variable, though, is a great way, especially when you're beginning, to think about the individual steps. Write out the different steps one at a time, and then try to do it one at a time, right? So remember how we said for the homeworks, you want to do one piece at a time and test it? You can console log at every phase of this to make sure you're doing it right. Any questions on this? We'll Slack out the provided solution, which looks different than mine even. So don't hesitate to ask questions. I'll Slack this one out too after the next exercise. So Fist of 5, how are we feeling on loops now? We have conditions in them. How are we feeling about those conditions? It's a little harder, okay. Definitely, it's getting a little harder, but that's okay. Let's go ahead. We're going to push on a little bit. I don't want us to get too far behind, but we have a really long exercise we get to do today. For the end of class, it's about an hour long, so we have plenty of time to ask questions, get a little bit more comfortable with your loops. While you're doing that, you'll be able to work with people, right? So the next thing we're going to jump to, it's kind of a tangent, but we need to know about it for this next exercise, are browser events. So for instance, there's a button on my page, and when I click it, I want to register that I clicked it. There's this thing called browser events that you can access in JavaScript that allow you to listen for those things. Or say the page is open and I start typing on my keyboard, and I want to know what I'm typing. I want to know every character I'm typing. You can listen for that. So we don't expect you to remember everything that we're about to cover. You can come back to this exercise and view the code while we're doing the final big assignment, right? because really, for you to understand everything I'm about to show you after showing you one time would be pretty amazing. So let me go ahead and pull up the Chrome. I'm typing on my keyboard, and this is exactly what I'm typing. H, G, F, D. Somehow, through the magic of JavaScript, it knows what I'm doing. So we've got Bootstrap in here. That's all well and good. We have a div that says you just typed, and then we have a span with a specific ID called user text, user-text, that just has nothing in it to start with. Okay? So again, I'll show you. Oh, awesome. I'll refresh. It says nothing. I hit F5. Apparently that's still registered. And then in here we have some code, some weird code in our script tag that allows us to listen to these events. So there's a bunch of stuff we have not covered right here in this little block of code. First off, that document object, you know how we use document.write? Well, document, like console, like variables, so on and so forth, is something that you can access. Something you can use, okay? So console's a good like similar thing because it's global, right? So you can get to document from anywhere in your JavaScript application. You don't need a special variable for it. It just exists. So does console. And just like .write is a function, there's another function called getElementById, which literally just requires a string that matches the ID of the HTML element. And you can see when I highlighted the ID right there, it also highlighted the ID in the span, so you can see that they're exactly the same. So what it does is it literally gets an element by its ID from the HTML, and you can store it in a variable. Right here. This is literally the JavaScript version of that HTML element. JavaScript allows you to do this, which is what makes it so powerful, right? So we set it to a variable. We've got the element by the ID. Now, remember, if this is not an ID that exists on the page, you won't get anything. It'll come back as null or undefined. So, the other thing is, this document object here, this document thing, has a function, or more rather a property, called onKeyUp. OnKeyUp, you can imagine, is like a variable that exists on the document, okay? So you'd access it like we'd access a function with the dot. The dot is just the universal accessor in JavaScript. And we can set it equal to a function. I know this is very different than anything we've seen. This function accepts an event, and basically what it does, it says every time something's clicked, we're going to take the key that you pressed, and we're going to put it in the text of this user text element. Okay? So, literally nothing in this block you've ever seen in this class so far, except for like the assignment stuff, right? So I imagine that this is very confusing. So we're going to go ahead, console log some stuff, just so we can see. So this is the beginning of the block, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and just console.log user text so we can see what it is. And I recommend you do this when you're writing your own code. I'm going to go ahead and console.log event. And actually, for good measure, why don't I just, instead of this is the beginning, I'll do document equals. I'll console log the document. And I'll do user text dash text equals, that's text. KeyUp event equals. Alright. So now I go ahead and I refresh. I'm going to refresh with the console open, and you'll notice I have two things logged. Okay? I have this document thing, which if I click the arrow, I get the HTML. Well, that's really weird, huh? But that's what it is. It literally represents the HTML document. And then I have this user text thing, which when I log it out, literally shows me the span. That's pretty crazy, huh? And then I go in here and I type S. Wow, this console logged at a really weird time, right? This console log's in the code right here as soon as I write it, right? I mean, it's in the code with the other console logs, but it doesn't appear until I type something. That's because this function that I'm using only happens when I press a key. And because of that, the console log only happens when I press a key. And I can come back here, press I, it'll console log again. And it turns into this crazy object. This is what an object looks like, which has a bunch of properties on it. Not super important to understand what's going on here yet, but just know that there's something called the key right here. You can see that bad boy. It's a string, because I just typed I, it's I. And here in code, you can see that we're using that key. We're changing the text content of the user text. So why don't I console.log new user text equals let's see what the user text looks like now. So we don't need much space here. So we have it. It's that span that says nothing in it. I'm going to type I. Oops, that's in the console. Don't do that. Clear that out. I'll type I, and I have the key up event. It gives me that crazy thing. And then here, this span is changed to have an I in it now. That's what that text content means right here. User text.text content. That's what's inside of the span. The literal text inside of the span. And we're changing it with that string I. Comes from the event. Remember, it's a literal string. We're putting that literal string value inside of this text content, and then I can just console log it out and see how it changed. No matter how many times I type, it changes. J, H, J, H, J, so on and so forth. So, I get that this is pretty complicated. Most definitely, it's very, very different. And we're going to be getting into what all of this means a little bit more later in the weeks, okay? So probably a little bit on Saturday, more next week. Just know that this is pretty important stuff that we're going to get into a little bit more in depth soon. So this is exercise number 21, the events, if you wanted to look at it yourself. Any questions on this before we move on? Feel free to ask questions. I know this is crazy. I know I did not explain everything on here, and I know you probably don't understand everything that's on here, and that's okay. You can reference this activity to do the next activity, because it's going to be effectively using the same logic. So, I know people have questions on this code. Jaime, what's up? What does the text content mean? So when you write a span tag and you have the opening and closing tags, everything in between there is the text content. So in this case, right here, the strong, nothing, strong, that's the text content of the span.
Strong tag is also part of the text content?
It's text, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I type it, it's text.
So could you change just the text and not the strong?
You would have to, so we use text content. You might be able to do, let's see how it works. Yeah, you literally have to put it back in there. So let's refresh it, see what it does. So text content renders it literally as text. Okay? There's another one you can use that we're not using for best practice's sake because it's a little dangerous, called inner HTML. Inner HTML is a literal HTML. If you moved the if you move the ID to the strong, yeah, it would just change the inner of the strong. So the same thing would work. So there's a couple things you'll notice about these functions that are sort of like our for loops. One, they have curly braces, and inside of the curly braces is all the code that happens inside of the function. These are all the lines of code that happen inside the function. They don't happen outside of the function. If I try to use this event, if I try to console log event out here, and I refresh, it's going to explode. Ah, it says undefined, actually, which is bad. This is another quirk of JavaScript, which is not good. It should, in any other language, explode. Because it doesn't exist, right? It's nothing. Not at that point. Because this function gets executed when we press a key. So you can imagine, behind the scenes, sort of like how we do some string and two lowercase, right? That's how we would call two lowercase on a string ourselves. Every time I type into the browser, it automatically does this. It gives us some event thing too. You can just imagine this is whatever. It's whatever it gives us. I don't know. It just gives us something. Passes it in there, right? That's basically what it's doing behind the scenes for you. If that helps your understanding at all. Probably doesn't, but...
What other types of events?
Oh, a whole bunch. There's click events. There's change events. Change events would be like an input box when you're typing in it. There are load events, unload events. There's a ton of them. I don't even know all of them. Check events. Yeah, key down. There's key up. There's mouse click, mouse double click. There's a bunch. And we're going to use a lot of them, especially with jQuery next week. For this exercise, I'm pretty sure we only need the on key up, and that's why we show it. And on key up means when I press a key down, I let go of it, the on key up registers.
So the function's only doing something because you have to listen for the specific key?
Yes. Yes, the function's only doing something because I specifically said when my key on my keyboard comes up, I want you to execute this code.
Is it technically listening to all events happening?
No, this one's just listening to key up. So if I were to, I could actually console log key up. So let me just, and I think document, nice, it has an on click. I could do this, console. So let's go ahead and refresh this. I'm going to clear the console. If I click, it says on click. I'm clicking with my mouse. If I type, key up. I'm typing. Notice they don't get logged at the same time because they're different actions and they're listening for different things. Any other questions? I know this is a bit overwhelming. TAs could slack this out so that you can reference it because you're going to want to reference it in the next exercise for sure. So I am going to show you what we're going to be working on. Why are there so many? All right. So it says press R, P, or S to start playing. So I press S. You chose S. The computer chose R. You lose. Rock, paper, scissors. S is scissors. The computer chose rock. I lost. P. I chose paper. Computer chose rock. I win. R. I chose rock. Computer chose paper. I lose. S. I chose scissors, computer chose paper, S again, so on, so forth. I got murdered. The computer knows exactly what I'm doing. We're going to be doing this. So this is going to require a bunch of stuff. For one, it's going to require listening to that on key up event because we need to listen for when a key is pressed, right? So that code's going to be pretty straightforward. You can almost copy it from this last example. But you're going to have to do something inside of that function. So like I said, there's code that executes when the key up happens. That's where a lot of your logic is going to have to live, okay? You're also going to have to figure out how to choose what you're going to randomly do with the computer, right? The computer is going to randomly choose S, P, or R, And you're going to have to figure out how to do that. You're going to have to figure out how to decide which one wins, SP or R, right? So there's going to be conditional statements. There's going to be, you know, there might be loops potentially. There's going to be these events that you're going to be listening for. There's going to be a whole lot we're going to do. Now, one of the other things that I want to cover really quick before you start this, because we're going to need them, are the operators for Boolean stuff. Okay, so there's more to Boolean operators that we haven't quite covered. Okay, so I have two Booleans. He's cool and he's nice. I think I'm pretty cool, but I'm probably not that nice. So, say you have a condition, and you want to check both conditions at the same time. You don't want to do an if and an else if and so on and so forth. Say you want to say, if someone's cool and nice, I want to do something. If someone's cool, but they're not nice, I want to do something. If someone's cool or they're nice, I want to do something. You can do that. So, say we want to make sure someone is cool and they're nice. You can use this nifty double ampersand operator to determine that they're both cool and they are nice. And it is read just like that. I am cool and I am nice. Now the way this works is both is cool and is nice need to be true for this to work. You are cool and nice. So if I go ahead and reload, no alerts, right? Now, if I want to say if you're cool or you're nice, we get that cool double pipe, like I mentioned earlier. You must be cool or nice. So, since I'm cool, but not nice, I am cool or nice. Now, if I change this to be cool and nice, you're cool and you're nice. Double ampersand means and. Both conditions need to be true. Double pipe means or. One of the conditions needs to be true, and it doesn't matter which one. Now, if I set both to false, we'll see what happens. Literally nothing. Now, what if I want to say if you're cool, but you're not nice? I am cool and mean. So remember I said the exclamation point, the bang, is read as not. So if I am cool and I am not nice, so if is cool is true and nice is the opposite of true or not true, aka false, then I am cool and mean. You are cool and mean. I could also, if I am cool or I am not nice, so let's change this to both again. I can refresh and I am cool or mean. So, and, or. Two really important operators that allow you to chain conditions in one if or else if statement. And they're very, very important. And you can use them a lot, and you'll probably use them in these scenarios. You might say if the user typed P and the computer typed S, the computer wins, right? You can see how that would work out. Any questions on these and or operators? I know there's more and more coming with these conditionals. It's like it never ends. I'm pretty sure we covered everything, but I probably forgot something. Who knows? There's a lot of them. Anyway. Cool. If there are no questions, here's what we're going to do first. Spend a couple of minutes talking amongst yourselves and pseudo-coding the solution to this rock, paper, scissors. So I'll show you again. We have rock, paper, scissors. Let's refresh it. Press R, P, or S to play. I press P. Peter chose R, rock. I win. I press R. They chose S, the scissors. I win. I chose S. They chose R, the rock. I lose. These are the rules of the game. Pseudocode this in words for a couple of minutes, and then spend an hour. Well, we're going to spend probably an hour trying to do this. In number 23 is what we're working on, RPS. There's an unsolved folder that has this stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll open up the instructions here on my computer. So go crazy, use a partner, try to get this done, ask questions. If there's anything that you're unfamiliar with at this point, ask questions. This is a hard exercise. It's going to take you an hour. What? Yeah, spend pseudocode for like a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go ahead, we'll slack out your pseudocoded solution. So try to write it up in VS Code, whatever, in text with a partner, and then you guys will go into actually writing code. So at about 8:30, we'll slack out the pseudocode solution for you. So work on that first. You want a plan. Yeah, pseudocode's number 22, so you can read that if you'd like.
Yeah, I've used the, like, a little bit for like, I don't know, like, if you do math.random times 10, there would be a random.
So here's the pseudocode instructions.
I don't know why it works like that exactly, but, like, you do, like, math.random times 100, 11 point something, 58 point something. So then if you surround it with, math.more, then it, I think that makes, that's what I thought. I think it's supposed to do that. The normal part.
And when we get started on the full exercise, I'm going to slack out a line of code that you're going to need that we haven't talked about yet, that Peyton's talking about how you can generate a random number to determine if the computer chose rock, paper, or scissors. I'll slack that out to you, so you don't have to... Is it already in there? Oh, never mind. They already have it. Okay. So in RPS 1 and in RPS 2 and RPS 1, there's some code to like help you, but it doesn't actually finish everything. It just does some of it. So the random generation of rock, paper, scissors for the computer is already there. You already have it. That's in RPS 2. Or you can start from RPS 1 and go completely from scratch. All on you. Also on this one, you can do groups of up to 4 also. You don't got to do just 2. So if you want to talk with more people to try to really get the solution down because it's hard, feel free. I recommend you work with at least someone though. This is tough. Alright, Stephanie, do you want to slack out the pseudocode solution? So we'll slack out the pseudocode, and I'll go ahead and display the instructions for the actual activity. You should start on that about now.
Oh, really? Yeah. Here, let's go over there and then you close it. No, I know. Yeah, the definitely nice. What's up? 23?
I know. I knew that the animation there was I don't know, when he was like shooting before, like he, I don't know, he would pull up the, but that one where it said like you press A, you press A or something. So those two things are very right? Yeah. So it's like on that selector. I don't know if he was using
Yeah, I just kind of figure out how to sort of do that. Just kind of brainstorming on this. I think it's a lot easier to check the code. Yeah.
I would take more than 5 minutes to pseudocode it myself.
Let's see. Yeah, see the article that first thing we did was Google. What? Did you read that one too? Yeah, see, that's the same one.
Yeah, I know. I saw it again as a root. It's actually estimated an awful lot, especially because we haven't even talked about that. So.
Oh, whoa. Well, remember, one step at a time. Just take it in small chunks.
Well, you're going to class, game class? There's classes this year. Okay. Don't figure out what it is.
That two different buttons. Yeah. Like, start stream, start recording. For some reason, I'm stupid. I'll start the stream and check it. So I'll start the stream and record.
It's 1 and 3 is what I'm saying.
Is there a time?
I mean, I guess, right when class starts, yeah, we need to start recording.
That's when it's just the beginning when you start?
Yeah, right when I start to make sure you're recording.
Okay.
That'd be the only thing I'd ask if you do that, right?
Yeah. It's on Chris's to-do list for attendance. I don't, he was just talking about for, remember,
So,
report.
and I know you kind of talked about it, but a simpler one than yours would be just mark your attendance every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday when the class starts.
Yeah, that was my what document, right? If you use the first on the sheet, like first script, well, let's explain the interest. Mark it right where I want to.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so. How do you get the choices though? Because it's got to be the same math. Computer access. That's a good question. Right, so he's got if, so if user choice, if I, so you get a very user choice stuff, like, if user choice, this is either maybe I'm trying to, so there's no choice, right? So user choice, it'll say, yeah, I think it's a variable, then you choice variable,
This is the best control.
variable computer choice, right? Computer choice, player choice. How would you be able to know this back? Oh, so that one. Right, that's defining a computer choice. So if you think user choice, then that would be so you did 1 for 1. Well, that's what they're so excited. Otherwise, that's a good sample for HTML browser. Which one?
You know, what would be a great app for those people would be something it's similar to what we did on Fiverr. So one of the a situational awareness app for like the military. So if they were deployed, they would pull up a map from there and kind of where they were deployed and pull up all of the historical data from events in that area. Was there anything that happened? You know, what for the risk factor. Anything that has been reported by a fire department, they could look at on a map. In addition to like line of sight information. So for them, kind of the same idea would be great if they had people already working on houses in the area and they knew there were issues with broken and they could pull up a map and say, well, you know, if we're really working on this whole police area and something like that, that's a great incentive for someone to go, I don't want that problem to affect your store. You better get termite coverage just to make insightful recommendations.
Yeah, I don't know. I know what they told me.
That sounds like
Yeah. So.
Hey, this is great. Yeah. But
the idea is not anything implemented yet. Yeah.
Expensive, hard to get.
Yeah. No, that's a personal preference.
Oh, really? Yeah, I just.
Usually that's the thing with small companies, you need someone that could do it.
Yeah, if you got a business background, it makes a big difference. That was one thing, because I have a business degree, one thing people always liked about me, like, the employer I went back to, they liked that I had experience with lots of different manually outputting stuff. And,
wow, that was great. I didn't even work.
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
It's the furthest thing from their mind.
Well, it's not only the business needs, but then it ends up being like the user needs, especially as a developer, like solution, it's hard to think about what you actually need. It doesn't matter what they want. Oftentimes they want
They don't know either what they want or what they
I think I want this, and then you do it, and this sucks. This is terrible, but actually what you needed. So,
Or get the map.
Or.
And I also think the UX, like I think that because I have so much experience, I was a medic, right?
Did you
So
guys
like that
get
is
the
definitely in a position where
HTML files?
I wasn't just like working.
I just
I was
yeah.
literally taking care of people, so I had to
Oh, yeah, no,
like
there's-
trying to compare different games.
So if you look on GitLab, there are two
the user,
existing
they-
HTML files and the
how
map
is the user
parts
gonna
are in
use
this.
this? And I
Already.
think that's really important.
Yeah, there's RPS1 and RPS2. The second one has the map.
Understanding of business, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, we haven't covered that yet, so they
Long
should.
list to hear it
Okay,
goes, man.
yeah, I was like, that's a crazy concept.
I felt like they said that I was five people. So I felt like I was so maybe
Lost couple of those.
I was in the lead.
That's good. People telegraph. So.
Yeah. My other
Winning ordinances.
Yeah, when I make a mistake, like my grandma did something interviews, and then they obviously lost.
Depends a lot on the,
Oh, yeah. So like.
sometimes it's a bit.
It's hard to create an array that lists out all the
Oh wait.
functions where I'm wearing.
So you just set a variable.
Oh, you just got you just.
You got an array. I think it should work out.
As from the.
Oh,
loop you mean?
I just put it all right here. And then I make a span like this, and then inside that, I don't need like this. I just did like yeah, he's low in the like the last like it wasn't really bad. I'll have this basically I push it so it makes my guess whatever he has and it does all the other stuff.
Oh, well, it's a prop though. That's a choice. It gives us us, right? Very realistic.
Yeah, it's guessing the same thing that you're guessing. Yeah, you're right. Wait, I think I just.
Oh, dude, now this makes sense now. If choice 1 equals choice 2, the two ifs is if if.
Oh wait, yeah, I'm setting it for.
Now that's starting to make sense. If choice 1
Well, I think it was working, it was just not showing the same information. Now, so I guess rock, he gets rock. I guess scissors, he gets rock. Gets paper, he gets paper, rock. I guess rock, he gets paper, rock. Man, you can't win at all. Well, there you go, you got one win. I just hold it down. The computer like over 5 him, and then he won. It's like it knows what you're gonna press. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they all seem kind of the same.
Yeah. Like really. There's one in the quarterback.
That's the one that didn't work. Yeah, I got one of them. Just another one out of them.
Would you give it to
Dude, yeah, that's the one that worked. That one was really nice. Yeah, I know, right? Just like this.
Like what I used to do when I was like, I'll just win lots. Yeah.
You're,
And then also making variables that doing losses with
So like, I'll show you something that makes sense. We'll go one by one, right? The user choice is a prompt that you choose, right? And then another variable, that's your choice, and then the computer choice. Computer choice is determined by. So if the computer choice is within the threshold, drop. Or if it's within that threshold, the compare compared to the other. Function choice one, choice two.
I know how to write the code.
Each other. Both choices equally close.
So you got the whole like dog.
Choice 21 rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, so go to the
Like it does it all in one way. Choice one, you just do what you did and you guys figure it out.
Basically, all the concepts
I have a hard.
What's your actual variable name?
Oh,
I know, right?
Variable name, right above that.
Wild. It is negative. Grab.
Yeah, I'm trying to find something that will kind of
Oh, you have to store how many actually
yeah.
So, oh, you have to make one for your win.
Jesus.
Yeah, and how do you, I just did that, so it's like, I like for draws, like if we get the same thing, draws plus we have everything. You could have also done like the draws like
no, this one is it? Style tag. Not even needed. It's a little overdone. Yeah. So.
Yeah, try to remember
these
that.
you could put like
And then you got yourself a point.
yeah,
exactly. So we're just gonna open source.
But you do have to set it. So yeah, you're setting it to a variable and keeping track of it so you can print it.
There's no price. We'll see if this oh, that looks good. See if it works. I don't know. They all seem to have this.
Sometimes when you push it, it's not running.
Where did you have it?
Like watch on I'll push S right now. So I'll do scissors, anything to count anything. But now I do scissors, didn't count. I don't know why it's just only counting sometimes more.
How do you examine?
That already exists out there?
We're trying to figure out what the common
All I changed was just, I took out the
Not a bad approach.
draws plus and added it.
I get that.
Oh, you know why?
Confusing is that if
incrementing, yeah, you
else,
yeah,
it's like choice is not as equal to okay, so that's like there's so many different like.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of ways to code this.
Oh no, yeah. Unless you have, you can't have like a thing equal to something plus plus. You might need to write it in parentheses so that it shows the execute that math. Basically, I made the variable draws, so it starts off at 0. We can get the same thing. Overdone. Draws up by 1. And the draws.
He has prior to it. Let's do that. Beautiful. That's animated and all. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
That big just in text bits, right?
Did you try it? What did it run?
I don't know if it's like something wrong with like existing issues.
This one's pretty good too. Like it doesn't try putting the parentheses around it on JS it does.
Also, in some languages, you can do plus then draw, and it will do it organized. So maybe that's what you need to do.
Well, it's
because of where it is. It's later in the logic. Yeah, it's later in the logic.
Oh, it's the logic. Let's see if it works.
Well, at the same time, I feel like it might have been broken before. I'm not 100% sure. It's just like sometimes, like that time I pushed it and it didn't count anymore. For some reason. That time it didn't count either. But that time it did. That time it didn't.
So we got that's not right.
What is there's nothing coming up in the console, like there's no error or anything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I guess rock, I guess scissors, nothing to do. I guess rock and he goes scissors, so I would win. So, yeah.
Oh,
and guess
separate.
bar, your guess decision.
Yeah, I would do, try just for, see if you can do plus plus wins. I know that one's
Would you
that doesn't explain why you're missing.
help with the linking again real quick?
some of
Linking
them.
a JavaScript file to the HTML. That's like
Yeah, there must be something about that. Mentioned in JavaScript that's not consistent.
Right. No.
Why that would be
Okay,
very
so script.
I think it's a source.
all you're doing is setting it to this, and then you're just trying to implement it. Was it?
No, it's type, right?
Thought it was, but maybe it was.
I would go back and just double check that.
Bracket
first.
Just like that.
Now your script tag you want to always at the very bottom of your body. Last thing.
Yeah, that's what I was. Okay, I was like, why isn't that working?
It would have changes something to it how it works, but
Okay. Well, it's not. It's I'm looking at the file.
No,
I
okay.
have a different file.
yeah. So you want
Yeah.
yeah, it's a better way to do it. And you want the script tag at the bottom because you want everything else in the HTML to be loaded before your script.
That's helpful. Okay.
So
I'm
your
just
code-
trying to look at a bunch of them, trying to see what I'm having problems with. It's just too many things to worry about. Like,
Now I bet if you go back
You'll get
and
it.
change
It's
it.
overwhelming now.
It's like if variable, you know, that's crazy. We don't have the CSS though. We have something about it.
There's no CSS involved because we're not designing. Use alt text.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of if statements, but remember you need the and the or to be able to put two pieces together as a finished product. You need to use those.
What do you need to set the Java file? You need script files? No, you don't.
Nope, you just write the JavaScript. Just write the JavaScript.
It's not me. It's not coming over working for some reason. I guess something.
First thing first,
Yeah,
do the console log.
it's a little bit simpler than the way I was doing it before.
First thing, top of the file, console log. This is my file.
I'm gonna try to get
That doesn't come
Right at
in.
the very top right there.
That doesn't come in, you jump to the front.
This is my.
Yeah, so I think it was just that one thing that I wasn't counting for. Like, if I get scissors and he gets paper, I didn't know.
Yeah. The other thing, if you really wanted to make your logic a little simpler, you may want to just put the RP and S associated with like numeric values somehow, like in an array,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, good luck.
Think about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I basically just tried to see what.
If one's greater than the other in the array.
We don't have a jQuery linked in.
Is that what dollar sign means?
Dollar sign is a jQuery construct.
Good approach.
So you don't
So I
have,
have to figure out that like,
you copy from
say
somewhere.
one is
somewhere,
paper, two is scissors.
I mean, the whole thing is that
if one is greater
I'm
than
trying
two.
to learn from others.
And then if one of them is 2 and the other one is 0, you have to figure out that
Other
ratio.
points do what?
It's gonna loop on you.
Yeah. Well, it's like I don't even know like where.
That's another way to simplify all of the ifs check.
Yeah,
Right.
Essentially.
Right now I'm checking like every
So,
specific.
and then
Yeah, you're trying to check every combination and that's how you miss it.
Yeah.
for each. Do you need a compare one though?
That's not part of the exercise.
I like a variable compare. Here's the choices together.
You can just do choice 1 equals or choice 2 equals. I mean, you're gonna probably have to store them in the variable to see what the choice was.
Okay.
But then, yeah, you could do choice 1 equals this or choice 2 equals this.
Okay.
It's gonna be each condition is gonna be 2 pieces, right? It's gonna be the user's guess equals something and the computer's guess equals something. And if the user's guess equals something and the computer's guess equals something, you can determine who wins or who ties or who loses. Right? Yes. So you're gonna have a bunch of if statements. gonna look like.
I'm thinking it's 6 total, right? There's 3 choices, and there's 2 ifs per choice. It's if this equals that, or if this doesn't equal that, then this will.
It'll be a little bit more than 6, I think. No, it might just be 6. So you're gonna have like, if the user chose R, and the computer chose something.
Yeah, so if,
R, S, or P. If the user chose S, and the computer chose S or P, right?
So it'd be like if user choice equals whatever P, and then if computer choice user equals R, and then it'll say, then it's a
Not that it matters.
It's not next to this. Remember, you gotta use the ampersands. However, they're. I forget how to write them. I can never remember. It's something like. I can never remember how to draw them in person. You know what I mean, right? The ampersand? Okay. So I have to. You have the user. Equals something, right? Then you have the var computer guess.
I just wanted to point that out.
Equals something. Then you'll have to do something like if UG for user guess. And computer guess.
Oh, okay. So it's even less.
Then do something. You're gonna have to do this for every combination.
There's another if then. So if user guess and computer guess equals that, it's a tie. And then if this and this.
If user guess equals R and computer guess equals S, what happens, right? That's how you have to build this logic. So it's gonna be a bunch of else ifs.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. Solid.
Unless you pipe it all day long.
What?
Unless you pipe it all day long.
You do what you, man.
Alright, it makes sense now. You're on the track. We need to fix it so I don't have to yes, user guess. Yep, yes. Well, yeah, it's actually yeah, parentheses, equals R, and computer guess. Yeah. I just think this is
Probably pretty long, yeah. Nice. Okay. Go from the number 2, because it gives you a lot of the code up front. Right? So you have all the potential computer choices. You have the user's guess. Okay? Then you have ability to get a computer guess. So you have that done. Now what you're going to do is compare the user guess and the computer guess and see who wins and who loses based off the results, right? Then update the order.
Yes. So I got my
user wins, user losses, whatever, right? And you track both of those variables.
make sure I get this down here.
So we'll start with R. Kind of like I proved there for them. If the user gets equals something and computer gets equals something, who won, who lost, who tied. Right? And then I'm the
R, well, he gives you one at a time. Right. So let's do R and R, so tie, right? Or tie. So
now we're going to start your game state. So if the you can start first of all if the user guess is in the R RPRS, nothing, right? Forget it. Skip the rest of it.
Then,
Or, if it's RPRS, then you can check RPS or computer RPRS. All right, so for those of you that are stuck, here's a few more hints. Okay, so first of all, you're going to need 3 variables. You're going to need wins, losses, and ties, right? Set them equal to 0, because you need to track how many wins, losses, and ties are happening in this code at all times, don't you? So first of all, you need to keep track of those so that you can then update the HTML. You're also going to need to know the user's guess. So if you start from that RPS2 or whatever, they give you some of the boilerplate code to determine the user's guess and to determine the computer's guess. So you already got that. Now you need to know, did the user press R, P, or S? If it isn't R, P, or S, I don't give a crap what it was. It doesn't matter to the totals, does it? And then you need to check the user's guess versus the computer's guess. And determine if the user won, lost, or tied. So you're going to have a bunch of different if, else, if checks here to determine if the user's guess was R and the computer's guess was R, it was a tie, right? So then we have to add 1 to the ties. And then at the end, we update the HTML. Does that help? A little bit? Get you a little closer? Yeah, see you working.
Yeah. Okay. No. All 4 of us at 9 yeah. So this is what I got so far. These are okay. So I can just try one. I think you can extend it. And then it just I don't know how to write it out. I just don't want one thing. So let's get some paper out and draw it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
No. If it works, it works. Nice. Well, I know my right here. Fine. I would check those fine. But technically, when you set a fine, you need a full condition. And what you're doing is you're checking PRS, right? You have a full condition here on the first book. And then you're checking PN. Now, if you're checking those, what happens is there's something called truthiness in JavaScript, so they're always evaluating for truth. So that's always happening. So you can console on your computer guess and see that. Now, if I press something other than RPRS user, it never goes into any other condition.
So this is what I have to. Okay.
So I would check those.
Let's start, right?
Check your console your computer guess after that if statement. I guarantee you all it happens.
I'll let you do that a little bit. So this is saying RPRS. Like RPRS.
Yeah, right.
What is that?
Alright, variables, right? So we have to define for both users and
Arrays, right? But we'll do the little ones too, remember? The ones from RPS too?
Jesse, was that key? Oh, I think he's just actually like that. Yeah, you got about first time. You know this. You can
Well, I got two plans, rock, paper, scissors,
Nice up. That sucks. I want to make it start happening. Adam, Heather, what are you guys doing? Sorry.
Oh, I'm just trying to collecting like massive areas of it's got like
so, where's the map?
Like
Incorporating it, we can stuck at let me see.
just like where it's good, and they got we're all the information for house when where by the customer within the market. Yeah, but this is right. So the computer will randomly just be like, oh, it's gonna be right? I'm square. So then put this on. That's like,
oh, it's really it we got? Tom Cruise. Well, you would afterwards. It's not an AI, but
But you're actually on the right track. So you need the rest of the conditions, and instead of alerting 5 when you're lost, store them in a variable outside of that function, so that you can constantly be updating them, and then work on it. So you're on the right track. You're actually not on the right track.
Oh, you did the best. Yeah, I'm just use it.
I'm trying to get this to like work. I'm just gonna use. So like right now, if we push any other key, is it still would be no choice?
Yes.
Lost. Like.
So that's
interview what he thinks about the internet instead of the internet. Wait, it's getting bigger.
Yeah, I was doing the document on Kia, but I know, like, just wanted to see what his answer was.
I guess it's I mean, it kind of is. No, but it actually exists. No, true, but it actually exists, and we're going to
big F, user gets,
right, the hardware doesn't actually
then 2A all of a sudden
It goes beyond that. It's no longer a compliment. It's what I'm about.
No, dude, they have some walking questions.
How do you feel about the?
Oh, okay.
How
So
do you
you're
feel
saying
about
so on the inner Wiz Wasp high line,
you get some nuance
around.
Personally, I think that sucks.
That's exactly it, man.
That's based. I come from a whole school.
We're going to spend a few more minutes working on this. I don't expect very many people to finish, so don't feel bad if you don't. This is tough. We'll go over it.
Yeah.
You guys finished?
No, we're actually I'm trying to get the prompts and see what I can put in.
Okay.
Computer choice.
Have variables, that's about it.
Yeah, trying to get that correct variables. So, okay, what would I put there? So you put computer games, but yeah.
The prompt would be like, what's the computer?
So,
Okay.
that's right. So
remember, you need to do
that will go in.
so instead of doing if text content equals R equals you need to do if my choice text content equals R or my choice text content equals or my text type the whole thing.
Okay.
And that'll be part of your problem.
Okay, so.
And remember, you want does not equal, not something equals this. So right now you have the exclamation point, my choice text content equals R, right? You need my choice text content does not equal R.
What left it on that word? I could like shorten it up a lot, but it works and I'll mess with it.
What's up?
Copy it all into a new file. Save that one and that's done now.
Just trying to get the initial part of, so we got this part. Then we'll kind of clear the prompt so we can do this thing.
You have one.
Yeah, that's fine. So what are you trying to check and see if the prompt is part of user guess or computer guess?
Try again.
One type of prompt produced 5 typos.
It happens.
I started conceptually like what I
Yeah.
I feel like that's really helpful.
So
so this would be
right?
No, but when I use the computer.
We're doing AngularJS. There's still pretty much.
Yeah, you can do an alert and say, enter one of these three values. And then if you're just using these to check whether or not the response was valid, you only really need one of them. Right? You don't need, you're just going to check it against RP and S.
I know the term, but I don't know where they're using.
You don't need, like the computer guess, you don't need to check this. You're generating that, you know that's right. It's the user guess.
It started off to be like JavaScript started off like VB.NET. They were kind of similar, then they branched like.
Yeah, real different.
That's why JavaScript has still got that try catch, but they probably very seldomly use it.
No, you still use it a lot, especially now. Yeah, there's newer constructs that require it more. All right. So that was tough, huh? Yeah. So let's do a fist of 5. How does everyone feel about that? All right. Yeah. Okay, that's more of what I expected after walking around and talking to some people. That was really tough. There was a lot of things that we pretty much never seen. The only part about that we had, okay, so we know how to make a variable, and we know how to do an if statement, and we know a little bit about arrays, but we've never really put that together. And then all of a sudden we're thrust in this project where not only do we have to put it together, we have to use like a function and all kinds of crap that just like appeared, and we learned about it literally an hour ago. This was really hard. So I'll go over the code with you. I don't expect anyone to have it perfect, but we saw some good solutions out there that were really great, that did solve the problem. So we're going to Slack this out afterwards. I'll Slack out a video. I think it'd be a good idea to try to do it again after we've seen it. Maybe after Saturday's class, try to do it again if you're not too busy with your homework. So how do we start? So one of the things we gave you were an array of the computer choices, right? Rock, paper, or scissors. Those are the 3 things that the computer can use, and that's it. The user's the same boat. Those are the only 3 that count for anything, right? So I mentioned that we wanted to keep track of the wins, losses, and ties. And defining them right here before the onKeyUp function was the key. Now, how did you know that that was the key? I expect none of you to have known that, because you don't know anything about functions or scoping. But that's okay. We'll learn about it later. But either way, this is how you'd want to keep track of those numbers, is by having these variables before this onKeyUp function. So remember how I said and showed you that when there are certain console logs that would happen, and then when I hit onKeyUp, we had new console logs coming into play? It's the same thing with these variables. We want these variables to exist always, and every time we click a button and we listen to that event, we would want our variables to potentially update, right? And to do that, we need our variables to exist outside of that function. Otherwise, they're recreated every time. For instance, user guess, we set it equal to this event.key every time we click. But if we had user guess up here, we couldn't set it equal to event.key. And we could set it equal to something. Say we set it equal to 0. We couldn't redeclare it with a var here because it would freak out. But we could do something like that. That's not what we were asked to do, right? And that's not what the example code that they gave us does. Anyway, I know that's kind of confusing because we haven't gone over the scoping rules, but either way, these 3 variables right here need to exist outside of the function call. So they gave us this line of code, setting up the user guess, and they gave us this line of code, which was how the computer chose something. Don't worry about this too much. It's a math function to basically generate a random number and say 0 through 3, or 0 through 2. We'll just pick one, and magically the computer choice will be determined. From there, we needed a nice big set of if statements. So remember I said you needed the pipe and the double ampersand, the or and the and. So first things first, we needed to make sure that the user actually pressed R, P, or S. And this is one way you could do it. You could say if they chose R, P, or S, then we can continue on. Otherwise, don't do anything, because this if statement is big, wraps around the whole thing. You can see this is the other end right up here where it actually highlights. So if it doesn't pick one of those 3, we're not going to do anything. We don't need to calculate a win or a loss or anything like that, right? Now we get into our choices. So there's several. The user selected R and the computer selected S, well, the user won, right? If the user selected R and the computer selected P, well, then the user lost. If the user selected S and the computer selected R, then the user lost. So on and so forth. until you get through all the different combinations, right? This is a lot of work. Lastly, this is something that they didn't even cover, which was amazing that they had this in the example. So you could have done this a bunch of different ways as well. But basically, you can generate the entire HTML block in one place using your wins, losses, your guesses, and all that. And you can just inject it right in to our game, which is just a div. Game right up here. So this is one way you can solve it. And I know this was complicated, and I know this was really hard. And I don't expect all of you to totally understand all of this yet. But if we break it down into the individual pieces, we should understand mostly the important parts here, like the if statements. We should get what this is doing if we just look at it in isolation, right? So does anyone have a question? The double, oh, okay. So that's a good question. Why are there parentheses around the user guess and the computer guess? It separates those checks. It's like an order of operations thing. So basically it says we want to check that the user guess equaled R, and we want to check that the computer guess equaled P in isolation from each other, and then compare the true false values that come back. Yeah, it's kind of weird. If we had
Do we really need to do that?
No, you don't. It's just a visual thing here. But sometimes you have more.
There are some cases where you have to. That's true.
Yeah, there are some cases where you need to, right? But in this case, we don't need these parentheses around them. It's just a nice visual thing. You may not like it. You may like it. Depends on you. I probably wouldn't have done it that way, personally. Now notice, too, we don't have an else, because else, well, nothing happened. No worries, right? Okay. This was really tough. Who has questions about this solution? It's okay if you don't have something come to the top of your mind because it was hard. But looking at it later, kind of investigating it, asking questions next class, maybe trying to do this again in your own time would be really helpful, because there is a lot of really complicated stuff here that we've just scratched the surface on, and getting more experience with building like a full program is going to be really beneficial at this point, because this is the kind of stuff we're going to start writing a lot more of now. What? Oh, Replit? Yeah, Replit, yeah. So there's a website, thanks for bringing that up. There's a website called repl.it, or Replit, that you can go to. If you could select this out, that'd be awesome. And basically you can go ahead and sign in, and you can just sign in. If you go to login, you can sign in with your GitHub. So if you're signed into GitHub, it'll automatically sign you in. And then I have a bunch already because I've used this before. But say you wanted to do like, you want to test out some JavaScript, you could hit new, type in JavaScript. It opens up this JavaScript thing, right? And I can type in some code. That is not what I wanted. And then I can hit run, and it's going to do all of that. So it's a good way that you can test code quickly. So if you wanted to test just the logic, you could potentially do that. Now you can't manipulate the DOM and do a bunch of stuff, but you can test a lot. This is a really cool website to play with, for sure, and help when you're testing out code. Anything else? Cool. I'm going to post a link to a YouTube video that goes over this solution and how you can get it. And if you could select out the solved for the rock, paper, scissors. If you have any other questions on this stuff, you know, reach out to us. Saturday we'll be back here. Daniel will be here this Saturday, so he'll cover that class. I know this was tough, but great job, everyone. And hopefully Monday, when I see you again, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable with this stuff.